What's up, guys? Welcome back to DCA. So, over the last few weeks, Bitcoin and the general cryptocurrency market has been showing weakness. We've discussed many times on the channel now how Bitcoin historically, when it drops below critical price levels, namely the 20-week moving average and the 50-week moving average, typically heads into bearish portions of the market. We've laid this out extensively over the past few weeks. Now, today, what I want to do is look at how have people who have invested in Bitcoin over long periods of time, how have they fared? And that's simply for the fact that on this channel, we take the approach that if you want to maximize your profits, what is the best way for an individual to do that? And so today, what we're going to do is simply look at the return on investment for long-term holders over time. And we're not going to cherry pick the data and simply only look at people that have been holding Bitcoin, since 2011. We're going to look at people that have been holding for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years and what historically have their results been. In addition to that, we're going to look at some trends that show price patterns for Bitcoin that are appearing right now. So with that said, if you guys like this type of content, hit like and subscribe. You could join us on the Discord channel where we talk about the macro level investment picture for Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency asset class. You can also find the DCA index risk model, which I've made many videos about so far. It's basically a risk model which helps you to identify where a market cycle peak may be occurring. It also helps to identify a market cycle bottom. So if we do head into a bear market, the model can help you identify where that bottom may occur. It's a trading view indicator. If you head over to the Discord channel, you can sign up for it there and I'll send it out to you. So with that said, let's do it. Okay, we're going to be looking at two different graphs today simultaneously. So we're going to take the camera off just to spare some real estate. So what we're looking at here is basically on the bottom, we have the entire price history of Bitcoin. So dating back to about July 2010 through current time. And on the top, what we have is if you were an investor in Bitcoin and you held for 1 year, so if you pick any given day, for instance, right here, if on this day you had been holding Bitcoin for 1 year, your return on investment, and if you go over to the right, you can see would be 25. What that means is you would be up about 2,400%. All right. So down here at 1, this is your break even point when we're over at 1. When you're below 1, that would be at a loss, meaning, if you went down to 0, you lost all your money. If you're down to 50, you're at a 50% loss. Okay. So there's a few interesting trends we should talk about first. First of all, over time, the maximum level of profit that you can expect from Bitcoin, at holding for 1 year is decreasing over time. So diminishing returns. And this is entirely to be expected. So just to illustrate an example, if you look at the first day that, on the chart at your highest level of return, you can see that it's at about 28.5 or so. And if we just come over here and measure our percentage gain over this time, so if you had been holding for 1 year at this point, you were up about 28,554%. Okay. So, that trend just continues over the lifespan of Bitcoin. And this is entirely to be expected. We expect that over time, you're not going to continue to get 25,000% gains basically every single year, which you were getting back in the beginning. And then you can see as we go to our second peak here, which corresponds to our November 2013 market cycle, you would have been up at that point about close to 100x. Our third peak, you would be up around 24x. And then this current peak, if you were holding for 1 year, you would be up about 10 or 11x. Okay. We just looked, or what we're doing here is looking at the 1 year holders and how often have they been at a loss. If you bought Bitcoin and held for 1 year, how many days could you have bought Bitcoin and be sitting at a loss at 1 year? And we see that, so these are the days where you would be profitable at 1 year. And these are the days where you would be at a loss for 1 year. Now, remember, this is just the instantaneous day. That means if you bought on this day 1 year ago, where are you sitting at? When you're below this white line, you're at a loss. Okay. It's just as simple as that. And you can see that overall, the longest time period where you could have bought at all of these days and you would be sitting at a loss was back in 2015. So in all these days in late 2014 through 2015, you would have been at a loss if you held for 1 year. And then we saw another sort of extended period happen in 2019. They all happen right after Bitcoin hits this upper trend line, this diminishing returns trend line, heads down, contacts the point where 1 year holders become at a loss from being profitable. Then we see typically an extended period of time where people will be at a loss if holding for 1 year. Okay. So we saw it here in 2012, in 2015, in 2019, and now it's going to beg the question of whether it happens again. Now, the thing I want to show you though is there have been a total of 3,815 days where you could have been buying Bitcoin. Okay. How many of those days were days where if you bought it and held for 1 year, you would be at a loss? And that comes down to 712 days. So about 1/5 of the time, 19% of the time. So that means 80% of the time, if you buy Bitcoin and hold only for a year, and that's your only intention is to hold for a year, 80% of the time you're going to be at profit for a year. So, that should start to put things in perspective for these people that are, buying, oh, the price starts to go down within 3 months, so I panic sell and get out. Well, most of the time you're going to be profitable. Being a long-term investor is typically going to be very, very profitable for you. Okay, so now we'll move out to our 2 year time frame. And what we see is something very similar. We have this trend line down. It's not, not a perfect trend line by any means. So in general, the trend line still stands. We're seeing a diminishing marginal returns over time. You would be at about a 39,000% gain holding for 2 years over here. You'd be at about 4,000 holding here. And if you were a 2 year holder here, you would be up about 1,500%. Okay. If we look at this, and again, we're focusing on how often have you been at a loss if holding for 2 years? And now you can see it's becoming exceedingly rare. So there's only basically been one large period in 2016, and then for a short amount of time in 2019 and 2020, where if you were holding for 2 years, you would have been at a loss. And how big would your loss have been? Well, if we go look, you would have been down about 70% after 2 years at certain points here. And basically we're looking, if you were someone who bought right at the market cycle peak, and then, from November 2013, you held all the way basically out to like this area here, you would have been at a 70% loss. But that's only for people that are buying the exact market cycle peak. And again, this is why you should be dollar cost averaging or simply not investing when the price is going parabolic like this. All in all, there have been times when you could be down about 70% for holding for 2 years. And more recently, you would be down about 65%. And this is a short amount of time, mind you, very short amount of time. I mean, look at this. We're talking about less than a half a year. We're talking about a few months here. All right. And overall, what are we talking about? So about 338 days out of 3,451 days have been where 2 year holders have been at a loss. So 90% of the days, if you bought Bitcoin, forgot about your portfolio, and came back and looked 2 years later, you would be profitable. All right. And many times, massively so. I mean, we're talking about 4,000% gains, 1,500% gains. And finally, and this one we'll just do real quick, 3 year holders have been at a loss very few days overall. In fact, we have to go back to 2016 and early 2017, and then for just a few days in 2020. Looking at the numbers, 2% of days in the history of Bitcoin, if you held for 3 years, you would have been at a loss after 3 years. So the entire point we're making is being a long-term holder for Bitcoin has been massively profitable over time. Okay. And this has panned out over and over again where, we're in a position where there are essentially no days where if you hold for 3 years or more where you will be at a loss. And this number has been decreasing over time, right? Okay, so then again, we're seeing our same pattern. We're seeing diminishing returns over time as we would expect. But now if you go back to 2021, the last time we hit this trend line peak, so we hit this peak in November of 2021 when we hit our market cycle peak at 69K. In fact, our all-time high at 69K. People who had been holding for 3 years at that point, and you wonder why you see sell-offs. If you were a guy who had been holding since 2018, you were up 20x at that point. Even if you go back to earlier when we made our prior market cycle peak at around 64K, 3-year holders were only up, they were only up right here. They had not yet reached this peak. So this is what we say. You have to look at different time frames and see where the asset may come under sell pressure. And for these guys who had been holding back since November of 2018, these guys who bought this massive capitulation event, these patterns are just playing out over and over and over again. Even now, these guys were up 19x or 20x for just holding for 3 years. And this is Bitcoin. If you're looking at something like Ethereum, the profits may be even higher. I think there's more, you're taking on more risk with Ethereum, but you're also getting, more potential upside. So this is kind of how I'm approaching Bitcoin. This is how I'm approaching crypto. And, this is why I suggest it to most people, because if you can start to view the market through a long-term perspective, you're giving yourself access to just absolutely massive potential. So that's going to be it for this one, guys. If you guys like this type of content, hit like and subscribe. Don't forget to head over to the Discord channel. We do a lot of discussion there regarding long-term investment approach to the cryptocurrency asset class. You can also sign up for the DCA index risk model there. And until next time, guys, as usual, see you.